Hi, everyone. For this week, I wanted to talk about a little bit of the breakdown and required readings for the history of ethnic studies. This is always a challenging sort of unit because I always wonder whether I should put this at the front or the end of our lesson. So you might see this early on or later on, depending on like the type, the sort of the length of the course. But essentially, the history of ethnic studies is really started in 1960s on college campuses in San Francisco. And so we're looking at students at UC Berkeley and San Francisco State really coming together and really identifying with how the curriculum was not representative of their own lived experiences. You had a lot of Western scholars or folks that would go overseas and talk about these different countries in like global studies classes, but really not having a stronger sense of what it really meant to be like a minority in the United States. And so this is where you saw a lot of students that protested and basically shut down the campuses to sort of get this particular, part of, our education highlighted, right? And maybe we've witnessed this in the past where we haven't seen, um, slavery only being talked about sort of briefly, or when we're talking about, something like Japanese American incarceration that might not have been talked about, or maybe was talked about, but I know, in some high schools it's never even really mentioned. And so when we look at how the history of ethnic studies really plays a big role in this, is because it comes from us. It comes from students like us who literally were saying to the administration that things needed to change. And this is why you're in this class today. And so I think it's just really important that to understand how, right, students like ourselves were able to change, right, the curriculum and change how higher education is really thought of and is approached. And it's kind of as a result of like, and as a result, it's now a requirement, for the Cal State University system, right? It's a requirement for a lot of sort of us even getting certificates or some sort of license, right? We're always required to take these classes. And so I think it's really important for us to understand why is that the case, right? It's because I think even if you're not a person of color and you're white, or you're an immigrant and you're a recent immigrant, and you don't really understand this history, part of it is to get a better understanding of this so that we can not only empower ourselves, but also realize that, hey, these are, this history is really important for us to understand so that when we do have a colleague or a coworker, we can really get a strong understanding of like where they're coming from, even if it's this sort of within this sort of academic setting, right? It's really good to sort of understand and learn about the history that is really not being highlighted, or hasn't been highlighted or told until recently, right? Until the 1960s, although it may feel like it was a long time ago, in the long scheme of things is not. And it's a very new field and it's a new discipline. And I think that's where our contribution comes to play, right? And so I think this is why it's important for us to understand and sort of highlight the history of ethnic studies. So I suggest, reading through some of these brief articles and descriptions, and kind of asking these questions. Why is it important? Who cares? I care. I think it's important, but I'm also coming at it from a from like a scholarly space, and I think that even though you might not identify as scholars, although I think you all are scholars, I think it's important that we think about this space and how it's allowing us to explore our own identity, who we are, and that history, so that we can become sort of better citizens to our neighbors, better colleagues, and also better understanding of like what it truly means to be pursuing your dreams in this country.